Welcome to At the Coolidge. I'm Tim Jackson, and we are talking about The Wrestler by Darren Aronofsky, his new film, with Brett Michel from the Boston Phoenix.
Good to see you, Tim.
You too. Nice to have you back.
Good to be back.
Okay. So, you like this movie?
We'll see at the end of this segment.
If you say, yeah, right. Well, I don't see.
Maybe we can wrestle.
We can arm wrestle at least, right here. And whoever wins gets to talk the most.
I'll let you win.
But I love Darren Aronofsky.
Even his last picture?
I did even like that. I just admire whatever he wants to try to do. I just think he's got, he's experimenting with ways to, I don't know, bring style, bring his own style to a film.
Oh, I admired his ambition on the last picture, don't get me wrong there.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Ultimately, the project didn't work.
That's right. But this does, yes?
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to that really personal territory of Requiem for a Dream.
Although not necessarily personal to him. Aronofsky is not what I deem a wrestling fan, but he was fascinated by the culture. Yeah.
When I say personal, I mean really getting inside the head of the character.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Especially because you start, I mean, this is Mickey Rourke. I mean, if he doesn't get, obviously he's going to be nominated for an Academy Award. You just cannot ignore this part. You can't get the poetry of his big, ugly mug out of your head, out of your head for days. It's really astounding.
The poetry.
The poetry. It's the poetry of ugliness or something.
And he did that to his own face. He dropped out of acting back in the 90s and became a boxer. Boxed for 4 years.
And he
took a tremendous beating over time. Wow. His nose had to be fixed 4 different times. His cheekbone was shattered.
So he looks more like the character in Sin City than he does, the earlier Mickey Rourke from all of those.
Yeah,
those
well,
films.
He's someone who was never quite comfortable with his looks. Anyhow, that early in his career, that was a big selling point for him. And, he sounds like a very damaged individual if you want to be an armchair.
It's like when you go see Nick Nolte, you sometimes worry. There's certain actors you worry about, and you see this, and you just can't separate your own thoughts about Mickey Rourke from this character. Although he disappears totally into this. He's unrecognizable. He's got a tan, he's got long blonde hair, he can wrestle, he's rippled, he's powerfully hot. Do you know how old he is?
Offhand, I don't. He's not a spring chicken.
He's got to be in his 50s.
Probably.
Yeah, and he's in awfully good shape.
Well, he got in better shape for this role.
Yeah, right.
He trained for quite a while, and it was tough for him, as with his boxing background, to sort of have to unlearn the boxing
to do the wrestling.
Wrestling is,
which is more acrobatic than it is sport in some ways.
You're essentially a stunt person. It's of course as much entertainment as it is a sport.
But getting back to the core of this film, it starts with tracking shots behind Mickey Rourke's head, and he's just turned slightly out. So you're going, this is going to be Mickey Rourke, right? And you waiting to see that face, and he makes you wait, and he just does a lot of these shots where he's walking behind him, and so you're feeling the physicality of just him moving through space, which I love.
The reveal of his face doesn't happen for at least. It's got to be 10 minutes into the picture. It's not until he emerges from the back of his van after he's been locked out of his trailer that he's living in. That's
a beautiful way to do that. It's a gasp moment.
It's a gasp, but it's lightened by the fact that he's, sort of just chumming around with some young kids who idolize him.
And he wrestles with them.
Still,
and he punching them, and they're all having fun together. And that's what I love about this character. He plays a wrestler on his last leg, so to speak, way end of his career, who has been famous.
And he has essentially a farewell speech in the film that, from what I understand, is that Mickey Rourke penned that speech himself. So you hear it in the film, and it's really coming from him.
Wow. And the other side of it too, where he is forced to work he works in a store. He's forced to work at a deli, to wear a hairnet, and there's this wonderful scene where he's doing the work, and you think, okay, where he's going to explode at everybody. We get that scene, but the first scene, he's really good at the job. He loves people. He's very funny, and he's at the core, he's a wonderful person.
That scene. It's interesting you bring up. I was speaking with Darren Aronofsky a couple days
You had lunch
back,
with him the other day, yeah.
and they actually had him working at that deli. It was the way they worked it out to be able to shoot it cheaply. The entire shoot, this film was relatively inexpensive.
Wow.
And so rather than pay a lot of extras, they were just using real people.
With the exception of Aronofsky's parents, I believe, are two of the customers.
They are two of the customers. Okay. He gave them credit, although they don't have speaking roles.
Oh, is that right? Oh, because they're not one of those.
It's at the deli, it's a mix of some actors, but a good portion of them aren't, and they weren't in on what was happening. But the actual manager of the deli ended up telling Mickey to sort of clean up his handwriting because these orders he was giving people when he was writing stuff down, they needed to actually know what they were getting.
Right, right. Well, that's one of the fun things about the movie is it just feels like the pace of real life. Those are real wrestlers, and they're wonderful actors.
They are.
And astounding-looking specimens of humanity, I must say. Large, bizarre-looking people.
Yeah, and there was one particular match in the middle of the film, I'm sure you remember, that was just very, very down and dirty. Staple guns being used.
Broken glass, barbed wire, blood everywhere. But the movie, that's not where the movie goes for the most part.
It's not, but that wrestler he is facing off against in that scene
is a real thing.
Is a real thing.
And Aronofsky says that he can be found on YouTube. Those matches can be found on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a very underground wrestling scene.
Why did he, you had lunch with him. Why did he make The Wrestler? What is it? What was the appeal of making the film in the first place?
I'm sure it was just the underlying humanity of these people. And they've, most of these professional wrestlers who were big coming up in the 80s have been completely screwed out of any sort of financial windfall they may have gotten. They signed off their rights to a lot of the toys that were made in their likenesses. They don't own the rights to any of that.
Yeah, there's all the Haystacks Calhoun and Gorgeous George and all of that early first-generation wrestler.
Yep.
But there's still a second-tier local wrestler circuit, which is what he's been relegated to as a character in the film. Which is sort of sad. There's not a lot of people in those high school gyms where they perform or wherever those places are.
No, and you have some of these guys would have been performing in front of, crowds of tens of thousands of people in their heyday, and now they're performing in gymnasiums for maybe 200 people a night.
So there's your impulse for this about the humanity, for sure. And I think he's also said that there's always been plenty of boxing movies, and that's always kind of the arc of can he, what's going to happen with that last match or whatever it might be. But this is something different. When you're a second-tier boxer, you probably don't keep going because you've been boxed silly. But as a wrestler, you're 50, you're in shape, you can keep going.
Possibly.
Possibly.
Even Mickey Rourke himself, the reason he's not boxing anymore, on the eve of a big match, he didn't pass his medical exam. They told him he was in danger of permanent brain damage if he took another good hit.
Wow. Well, I hope he keeps acting because this is he's still definitely got those chops.
Well, it seems like the people who loved his work early on are really going to bat for him now. It's been tough for him to get work. As a matter of fact, in The Wrestler, he almost lost the job. The financiers weren't willing, or they were uncomfortable with putting up the money, and there was a point when Nicolas Cage was set to step in and do the role.
I love Nicolas Cage, but please God, no.
Yeah.
Not as a wrestler. Yeah. Wow. I can't imagine.
We benefited from that knowledge.
Imagine.